Welcome to Study Faith with AI, where we use the power of AI to help you explore the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
I'm Meg Jensen.
And I'm Paul Carter.
And we're Google AIs. Whether you're a lifelong member or just starting to learn about the church, we're here to dive deep into its history, beliefs, and culture.
So if you're ready to learn, you're in the right place.
That's right.
Let's get started. Welcome back to the Deep Dive, everybody. Today we're going deep, way deep into the early life of Joseph Smith Jr. But not in the way you might be thinking.
Yeah, not at all.
Not so much about like his personal biography, but more about his family and the kind of religious world that he grew up in.
Yeah, exactly. It's more like a deep dive into the religious environment that really shaped him.
Exactly.
His family, his parents, their beliefs, even arguments they had. And we're going to try and see how all of that might connect to the Book of Mormon and the whole start of Mormonism.
Right, because it's like, it's got to have some impact, right? I mean, you don't just come up with this stuff out of thin air.
Of course not.
There's got to be some background there.
Absolutely.
And we've got some really cool sources to work with here. We've got Lucy Mack Smith.
Yes, his mother.
His mother, right, and she wrote, her own accounts. So we're taking that, and then we're also looking at what some scholars have said about all of this, people who've really dug into this stuff.
Yeah, people who've kind of analyzed it and compared it and contrasted it.
Exactly.
So we're taking all of that together to try to paint a fuller picture.
A fuller picture, yeah.
Of this whole religious landscape.
Right, because I think a lot of times, especially with religion, it's easy to kind of look at it as just like dogma. It's just these beliefs that come out of nowhere.
It just appears.
Yeah, exactly. But there's always a human story behind it.
Always.
And so that's kind of what we're going to try to uncover here.
Exactly.
So to really kind of break this down, we're going to look at four main things. First, we got to talk about the Smith family itself, like what was going on religiously within their house.
Right.
And then we're going to talk about, how these kind of theological tensions appear in the Book of Mormon.
Yeah, like how those ideas kind of play out in the actual text.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And then there's this really interesting connection between Joseph Smith Sr., the father, and his visions, and then Lehi's vision of the Tree of Life.
Yes, absolutely.
And we're going to get into the weeds on that because that's super fascinating. And then finally, we're going to kind of zoom out and look at the big picture. Like, how did all of this family dynamic, this religious landscape, influence Joseph Smith Jr. in his prophetic, journey and the whole development of Mormonism as a religion?
Right, because I think it's important to remember that this isn't just about history.
Right.
This is about understanding how a religion begins.
Exactly. So buckle up, folks. This is going to be a good one. All right, so let's dive right into the Smith family itself. Our sources, they tell us a lot about the different religious views that were happening right there under their own roof.
Yeah, and what I find so intriguing is that it's not, like a perfectly harmonious picture of everyone agreeing on everything.
Right.
There's some real tension there, and I think that's really important to highlight.
Absolutely. So tell me more about like Joseph Smith Sr., the father, his religious beliefs. What was going on with him?
So, from what we can gather from the sources, Joseph Smith Sr., he wasn't really a fan of organized religion, at least not at first.
Really? Okay, so he was kind of like a lone wolf spiritually.
In a way, yeah. He preferred to study the Bible on his own, kind of come to his own conclusions. He didn't really feel like any specific church had all the answers.
Okay, that's interesting. And then later on, what happened?
Well, this is where it gets really interesting. Later in his life, and this is crucial because this is during Joseph Jr.'s formative years, he actually embraces this idea called Universalism.
Universalism? What's that all about?
It's the belief that ultimately everyone will be saved.
Everyone, like no matter what.
Exactly, no matter what. It's this idea that God's mercy is so big, it encompasses everyone. And this was pretty radical at the time.
Yeah, I bet. Back then, it was all fire and brimstone, right?
Oh, absolutely. Predestination, eternal damnation, very Calvinist.
Heavy stuff. So Joseph Sr. is over here talking about universal salvation, and now we've got Lucy Mack Smith, the mother. What about her beliefs?
Yeah, so Lucy, she kind of leans in a different direction. While Joseph Sr. is moving towards Universalism, Lucy is drawn to Presbyterianism.
Presbyterianism. Okay, so she's more of a traditional churchgoer.
Yeah, you could say that. And get this, Not only does she become a Presbyterian, but four of their children, Hiram, Samuel Harrison, and Sophronia, they all join the Presbyterian church too.
Wow, okay, so we've got a real split happening here. Like dad's over here kind of doing his own thing, and mom and some of the kids are actively involved in a specific church.
Yeah, and this is not some minor theological difference, right? We're talking
Yeah.
about like fundamental beliefs about salvation, about God's nature. And imagine this, Joseph Jr. is growing up right in the middle of all of this.
Yeah, it's like, what do you believe when your parents have such different views on religion? I
Yeah.
mean, he must have been asking some serious questions.
Oh, absolutely. And there's this one quote from Joseph Sr. that I find so revealing. He basically says that he felt people without any religious affiliation understood more about the kingdom of God than those in established churches. Like, that's pretty strong, right?
It's a huge statement, yeah. I mean, it shows you how disillusioned he was with organized religion.
Exactly. And then there's this other event that I think really highlights the tension in the family. So their son Alvin, he dies, and a Presbyterian minister, he preaches at the funeral, and he basically says that Alvin has gone to hell.
Oh, wow, that's brutal.
It is, and Joseph Sr., he just loses it. Like, he cannot stand this idea. It leads to even more of a break from organized religion for him.
Wow, so this isn't just like casual disagreements over dinner. This is some deep stuff.
Right.
And Lucy, what does she do?
Well, Lucy, she kind of stays involved in the church, so you can see the division, even in the face of such a tragedy. Their reactions are so different. And Joseph Jr., he's witnessing all of this.
Yeah, he's right there in the middle of it. So, okay, we've got this really interesting and complicated theological backdrop in the Smith family, but, you know, how does this relate to the Book of Mormon? Like, how do these family conflicts, these different beliefs, how do they show up in the book itself?
That's a really good question. And some scholars believe that the Book of Mormon, it's not just some random text that appeared. It might actually be a reflection of the Smith family's own experiences.
Like their struggles, their search for truth?
Exactly. Not a literal transcription, but like a symbolic representation of their journey.
Okay, that's interesting. So it's like their personal lives are kind of woven into the fabric of the book.
In a way, yeah. And one of the most compelling examples of this is the parallel between Joseph Sr.'s second dream and Lehi's vision in the Book of Mormon.
Oh, yeah, I remember reading about that. Something about both of them having visions with their children being divided or something.
Exactly. In both visions, there's this split among the children. Some are on the right path, some are not. And this really resonates with what was happening in the Smith family at the time.
What do I mean?
Well, around 1824, Lucy actually took some of the children and kind of went her own way, while Joseph Sr. took others. There was a real separation within the family.
Wow. So it's like that division in the visions is mirroring a real-life division within their own family.
Yeah, and then there's this other layer, too. In Lehi's vision, his family eventually finds unity again after they eat the fruit of the tree of life. And some scholars see this as symbolic of the Smith family's own desire for unity. Like maybe they were hoping that with the restoration of the church, they could all come together again spiritually.
That's a really cool connection. Like the Book of Mormon is almost offering this vision of reconciliation, a way for the family to heal those divisions.
Right. But, it's important to remember that we're dealing with historical sources, and sometimes it's hard to know for sure which way the influence was flowing. Like, one source raises the point that Lucy's account of Joseph Singer's dream, which she wrote in 1844, might have actually been shaped by her knowledge of the Book of Mormon, which was already published by then.
Oh, that's a really good point. It's like, did the Book of Mormon influence her memory of the dream?
Exactly. So, it's not always clear-cut. But I think it's safe to say that there's a definite relationship there, and it's something that you, the listener, can think about and ponder.
Right, right. It's all part of this complex tapestry of influences. Okay, so let's move on to the visions themselves. I'm really fascinated by this whole connection between Joseph Sr.'s visions and Lehi's dream, especially that tree of life imagery. It's so powerful.
It really is. And it's worth noting that Joseph Sr., he didn't just have one vision. Our sources actually talk about at least 7 visions that he had between 1811 and 1819.
Wow, 7. Okay, so visions were kind of a regular thing in this family.
It seems that way, but the one that's most relevant to our discussion is his second vision. It happened around 1811 while they were living in Lebanon, New Hampshire. And the context is really important here because it seems like he was going through a lot of internal struggles with his own beliefs, maybe even clashing with Lucy's views.
So it's like this vision comes at a time of real religious turmoil for him. Okay, what happens in the vision?
So he starts out in this desolate field, and it kind of transforms into this barren world. It's pretty bleak. And then he meets a guide who leads him to this broad road, but the road is also desolate. It doesn't seem like the right way.
Okay, so he's lost, he's confused.
Exactly, but then he finds this narrow path, and it leads him to this beautiful stream of water. And he follows the stream to its source, and he ends up in this valley.
And I'm guessing this is where the tree of life comes in.
You got it. He sees this incredible tree, and it's bearing fruit that's described as white, or even whiter than snow, and incredibly delicious.
Man, that sounds amazing.
Right. And in the vision, Joseph Sr. is so overwhelmed by this fruit, he just wants to share it with his family. So he brings his wife and all 7 of his children to the tree, and they all eat the fruit together.
That's beautiful. It's like this moment of shared spiritual experience.
It is. And then it takes another turn, because across the valley, there's a spacious building filled with all these well-dressed people, and they're mocking Joseph Sr. and his family. They're pointing fingers, laughing at them. But in the vision, Joseph Sr. and his family, they just ignore them. They are so focused on the joy of the fruit that the scorn doesn't even matter.
Wow. Okay, so we've got the path, the incredible fruit, the family sharing the experience together, and the opposition from the outside world. And all of these elements, they show up in Lehi's dream, too.
Exactly. It's really hard to just brush this aside as coincidence.
Yeah.
And as we mentioned before, some scholars like Hill and Bushman, they think that Lucy might have been influenced by the Book of Mormon when she wrote about this vision later on.
Right. That whole question of, like, what influenced what?
But there's another interesting point to consider. The account of Joseph Sr.'s vision, it's written in the first person.
What does that mean?
It means that it sounds like it was written from Joseph Sr.'s perspective, not Lucy's. And that suggests that it might have come from his own writings or things he told people before he died in 1840.
So before Lucy wrote her account.
Right. So if that's the case, then it's less likely that her memory of the dream was shaped by the Book of Mormon. And it opens up this really intriguing possibility. What if Joseph Jr. actually remembered his father's vision?
Like for when he was a kid.
Yeah. And what if that memory influenced him when he was translating or writing the Book of Mormon? It's like this family vision became part of the scripture itself.
That's wild. And it makes sense when you think about what both of these visions are really about. It's about a family that's kind of rejected by the wind, but they find this incredible spiritual nourishment and they stick together through it all.
Absolutely. And that theme, it runs deep in Mormonism, doesn't it? The idea of a chosen people facing persecution but finding strength in their faith and in each other.
Yeah, it's definitely a core part of the story. Okay, so we've talked about the family dynamics, we've talked about the visions, but now let's zoom out a bit. How did all of this whole religious environment in the Smith family, how did it influence Joseph Smith Jr. and the development of Mormonism itself?
Well, I think it's important to remember that Joseph Jr. didn't grow up in a religious vacuum. His parents, they were very intentional about teaching him about Christianity. He even said that they spared no pains in his religious instruction.
Okay, so religion was definitely on the table from a young age.
Oh, yeah. But at the same time, they were also skeptical of organized religion. They were living in this time of intense religious revivalism, what they called the burned over district.
Right, where everyone was getting all fired up about religion.
Exactly. And Joseph Jr., he kind of picked up on that skepticism. He didn't feel like any of the existing churches were quite right. And this mirrored his parents' own feelings. They both favored personal Bible study over just accepting what some preacher was telling them.
So there's this real emphasis on individual revelation, on finding your own truth. And it's in this context, this family environment of spiritual seeking and questioning, that Joseph Jr. has his first vision in 1820.
Exactly. It's like all of these pieces, the family skepticism, their openness to spiritual experiences, their emphasis on personal revelation, it all comes together to create this space where something like the first vision could happen.
Right. It's like the soil was already fertile for something new to grow.
And then you have the death of their son Alvin in 1823. I mean, that was a huge event for the family. It really shook them.
Yeah, I can't even imagine. And didn't Alvin play a role in Joseph Jr.'s story too?
He did. There's this account that Alvin actually encouraged Joseph Jr. to obtain the plates.
Really? So even in death, he's still kind of part of this unfolding narrative.
Exactly. And all of this, the visions, the deaths, the religious debates, it all contributed to this family culture where spiritual experiences were considered normal, even expected.
So when Joseph Jr. starts talking about angels and golden plates, It's not like his family is completely shocked. It's not totally out of left field for them.
Right. And if you look at the themes that emerge from Joseph Sr.'s visions, the guidance through a difficult world, the importance of family, the opposition from the outside world, these are all themes that become central to the Book of Mormon and to Mormonism itself.
Yeah, that's true. It's like the seeds of these ideas were already planted in the family's own spiritual journey.
And I think that's a really important takeaway for our listeners. When we try to understand the origins of a religion, we can't just look at the founder in isolation.
We have to look at the context.
Exactly. We have to understand the world they came from, the family that shaped them, the beliefs that surrounded them.
It's all connected. And in the case of Joseph Smith Jr., that family context is absolutely crucial to understanding his story and the story of Mormonism.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
So there you have it, folks, a deep dive into the religious world of the Smith family. It's a complicated story full of twists and turns, but it's a story that helps us understand the origins of a major world religion. And it leaves us with a lot to think about.
It does. I mean, what about your own family?
Yeah.
How have your family's beliefs, or maybe even their lack of beliefs, shaped your own spiritual journey?
That's a good question. I think we all inherit something from our families, whether we realize it or not.
We do. And sometimes those influences, they can lead to something totally new and unexpected.
Like a new religious movement.
Exactly. So keep that in mind, listeners, as you go about your day.
Thanks for joining us on the Deep Dive. We'll see you next time.
If you find value in this exploration, please like, share, follow, and consider becoming a subscriber. Your contributions help keep these conversations going and allows us to maintain the highest quality production. You can find all the details at studyfaithwithai.com. Thank you for being part of this journey.